Okay. Okay. So today is the 16th day of Sivan, and even though it's a Tanya class, we'll start off with the Hayom Yom as a kind of a warm-up. So today's Hayom Yom, the early sages who were like angels, may their merit protect us, have already determined that the healing of the soul is like the healing of the body. The crucial first step is to identify the location of the illness, whether it is caused by the crassness, grossness, and corruption of his physical body, or by a failing in his soul powers. The person being inclined to undesirable traits like arrogance or falsehood and the like. Or the source of the malady may be habit, inadequate rearing, or unwholesome environment having brought on bad habits. Without ascertaining the specific site of the illness and the cause of infection, it is impossible to embark on a cure. One can only prescribe an orderly, proper conduct in all matters, what to do and what to avoid. To do good in terms of observing mitzvot, designating times for Torah study and acquiring good character traits, and also to turn away from evil. So I say, Sur Meira va'aseh tov. Most urgent of all, however, is that the patient make himself aware of two things: to know that he is ill and to desire most fervently to be cured of his malady. To know that he can be cured with hope and absolute trust that with Hashem's help, he will indeed be cured of his sickness. I want to reframe this in a different kind of a way. And the different way that I want to reframe this is that, and especially with a view, because we're coming into the times of Mashiach, and in the times of Mashiach, healthcare will be different and health will be different, and we'll be much more aware of how to keep ourselves healthy in body. We'll be much more aware of the fact that bodily illnesses reflect spiritual or emotional illnesses. And we are becoming smarter and more wise in realizing the things we need to realize, so that the idea that illness can be very different in the future times, that let's say medicine will be preventative medicine and there'll be an ability to be much healthier and much more wholesome in a way than we are now. How so? Because we're going to get more and more into energy medicine, more and more the mind-body connection, more and more in that idea of pursuing balance and harmony in the psyche and in the emotions that are going to impact on our physical health. Why? Because they're seeing that, and I don't know if I've just said this, but they're seeing more and more that many physical maladies are somehow connected or often impacted by emotional imbalances, stresses, and tensions and such. So why am I saying all this? Because the effort and the thing that seems most important for us in moving to this place of greater healing and wholesomeness is that we need to learn to become authentically ourselves. And that is the most important thing, that, in a way, the most important avoda that we need to do is how to be radically honest to being true to our true nature. So because we have the perspective of Yidden, and especially right now, Yidden learning Tanya, so we understand that our true nature is that we are primarily a soul that is in an experience, having an experience in the body for 120 years, and then we go back and maybe we won't come back again. Maybe this is the last Gilgul, but we primarily a soul, and our true nature is to be as in sync with that reality to the greatest degree possible. So when we're looking at this Hayom Yom, and we're talking about the healings, and we're talking about the healings in the soul, we're talking about the healings in the body, the thing that would need the most rectification is the aspect of us that is furthest from our authenticity. Because the more far away we are from our authenticity, the more we're not going to be in alignment with our true nature and our true self. And the more we're going to end up creating something that is not going to be in full flow. So, in the wording that the Hayom Yom put it, is talking about crassness or grossness or corruption of the physical body, a failing of the soul powers, the person being inclined to undesirable traits like arrogance or falsehood. Those are all signs that the person is not in sync with their authentic self. Why they have to lie to themselves, why they're being arrogant, why do they feel the need to inflate themselves? Because they're not in sync with their true nature, and they're not in sync with being radically honest to their own soul and to their soul's purpose and to their identity as a person who's really a chelik Elokai. The source of the malady could be a habit or some unwholesome environment which allowed that person to be disconnected from their true self. Right? You following? You with me? Without ascertaining the specific site of illness and the cause of infection, it's impossible to embark on a cure. One can only prescribe that people do the basics, aseh tov v'tzur meira. But if the person is suffering from a spiritual or a physical malady, the first thing to know is that he is ill, that he is not balanced, that he somehow got disconnected from his true authenticity, and that the person should know that he can be cured with hope and absolute trust that he can be cured of his illness. I would say that he can, and he can be cured. He can come back on track with his essential self and be much more in harmonious with who he's supposed to be. So I'm curious how that's landing, and if these words have meaning for you, to be your authentic self in order to come to physical, spiritual harmony, and how you related to what I just said from the Hayom Yom.
So for me, as you were reading it, my mind was a little blown by the fact that it addresses something that I've been going through this week, and that is like deep self reflection on an issue that's come up out of nowhere, like major issue, but out of nowhere, and at a balance, and going to his spodudut as a way to get in touch with the direction which to go, and then hearing a lot of the answers and getting okayed again, like balanced again. But so I so get this piece. It's so of course the person who has MS, I always felt that my illness came from the enormous stress of years gone by. Baruch Hashem, it's, the stress isn't like what was, 40 to 20 to 40 years ago. But yeah, so I relate to it very, very deeply.
When did you get the MS in relation to the very stressful time that you went through?
At the end of it, like it was 20 years ago. It was like when that period of 20 years was
Right,
coming to an end. Like I believe it's dormant in our bodies,
right,
and stress kind of triggers it.
right,
Spending the last 20 years trying to get back in balance.
right. Okay, well, I give us all blessings, right? That we should all be in balance and in sync and in touch with our authentic selves, which means our unique souls, where we're different and we need to be in touch with our uniqueness, and then the aspect of us as Yidden who are connected to Hashem and in touch with that. Um, I don't want to say genericness, but that place where we actually connected and similar to each other. I just left one book behind. I just have to get
Yeah, I
it.
don't know why the schools don't teach individuality, uniqueness, cultivating personalities. It's not a big thing in school.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I'll come back in 1 second.
Okay.
Just get the
Ina Bracha, are you near Boston?
I don't know why schools don't teach that. And I would say that just like we know a Sefer Torah, which has a letter missing, is not a kosher Sefer Torah, that Hashem created everyone with different qualities and actually different lacks, which is interesting. We all lack in different ways. And then we live with an effort to fill those lacks. That's a lot of what drives us, and that's what brings out our gifts because we're trying to address the places where we're lacking in some way and the places where we need to work harder to fill different gaps. So it's interesting that we were created with those lacks so that we will work to articulate ourselves in some way to fill those lacks and gaps. So, in a way, if you look at the Aleph base, all the Aleph base letters are shaped very differently as we are. We're shaped very differently by our experiences, our parents, our early childhood, and as we shape by the challenges and the struggles of our experience, that shapes us and informs how we're going to respond and who we're going to become. So, of course, our uniqueness is because Hashem's waiting for those very things to be expressed in the world. And if we not in authentic response and connection to our reality, then we're not going to produce the note that Hashem wants us to fulfill or to produce for the symphony of humanity, right? There's a special note we're supposed to be sounding and a special articulation that only we can do. And if we're not authentic, if we're trying so hard to please everybody else and to be like everybody else and to do what everybody else is doing, then we can't create a true sound. And then to the extent to which we're not connected to our true sound, that's the extent to which we're going to be out of balance with our authentic, essential nature. So why don't schools teach it?
I
I
could
guess
I could think
they,
of two schools that do though.
yeah, which
One
one?
is the Chabad High School, which I was so against Becky going to, Becky going to so many years ago, 15 years ago, and turned out to be the greatest blessing. And Berea in the old days, I don't know what Berea is today, but Sarah went through this incredible metamorphosis of focusing on individuality at Berea.
So Becky was at Rabbi Kagan's?
Yes,
Wow. Wow, I'm really happy to hear that she had such a positive experience there. That's
amazing. There were only 6 girls in the class, which is what I was against, but it was an amazing experience.
wow.
Both of them.
So, yeah, my daughter didn't want to go, and I'm not sure that it was the best thing for her that she didn't go. She might have done well to have gone, but Hashkoch Pratis didn't go in that direction.
Mhm.
Okay. So, um, okay, so we are coming into chapter 14, which is now that we've defined um, now that we've defined who a Benoni is, who's a Rasha, who's what kind of Rashoim, what kind of tzaddikim everybody is, now we can focus on how do we become a Benoni and really the value or the power of living in the now. But just before we go on, move on, I want to share something with you that I think will be very helpful. That all this time we've been talking about defining these different characteristics, and I heard from my good friend and mentor teacher Miriam Rhodes that all these different qualities, these different personality types, they're not necessarily different people. They're different moments that we go through in our process. That sometimes, and now I just heard it really from Rabbi Friedman, that sometimes we could be functioning, even if it's a brief moment, like a tzaddik. Like there's certain things we just can't even imagine we would do. And in that moment, we like a tzaddik. And then there's certain places where, at certain moments where we can be functioning like a Benoni. And there's certain moments we could function more like a Rosha. And the way Miriam explained it, she said she just also learned it, and I think she learned it studying with Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg, is that these are not personas, but they're aspects of us that can be, we could be living into the Benoni aspect of ourselves, or the tzaddik, or the Rasha. I
Did you
mean,
go to Barayan?
yes, we have to go to Bad Ayin because May and Miriam made our shidduch, and we sort of, it's almost like a kibbut ava
A
aim.
pilgrimage.
We can't really go to Israel and not go to Bad Ayin, so we always make sure we go to Bad Ayin. Yeah, so did go to Bad Ayin. So at the same time, there is such a thing as a tzaddik, and there is such a thing as a Benoni, and there is such a thing as all these qualities, but to also have in mind that these are also headspaces and levels of being that we can encompass in different moments of our being. So, so let's open up the screen and we can look inside. And we coming up. We in chapter 14 now. And okay, so the rank of Benoni is one that is attainable by every person. Each person should strive after it, and if he has not attained it, he should not think it's beyond his reach. So the whole point of Tanya really is to teach us that every single person can be a Benoni. Because, and then for every person can at any time or hour be a Benoni. So it's interesting because there's this concept of living in the now. Like a Benoni, this is such a quantum physics construct of time. It's really cool. Because you could say a Benoni is someone who's never ever sinned, right? That's the quality of a Benoni. He doesn't sin, he's never sinned. But what happens? Maybe but now it's saying that you could be a Benoni, you could be a Benoni at any moment or any hour, you can be a Benoni. Well, okay, maybe I'm having a Benoni moment right now, but last week I was sinning. Ah, but you did tshuva. And the power of tshuva is that that is no longer relevant to who you are. So you could have sinned, but if you've done tshuva, you're kind of starting anew all the time. And right now, in this moment, at this time, in this hour, you can be a Benoni. And your past doesn't really have to impact because we believe in tshuva. Isn't that amazing? And what's also amazing of it is this power to recreate yourself and be a new creation every moment. Who you were last week or last year or last month is not really relevant. If you did tshuva, you're not that person anymore. So I think that's very redemptively radical because you don't have to carry baggage all the time. If you cleared it, if you let it go, if you did tshuva, it's not reality for you anymore. You're not that person anymore. I think that's pretty amazing. Because a Benoni does not abhor evil, unlike the tzaddik, he does not find worldly pleasures revolting and loathsome. and this is very important. You might have gone to Neve, as I went to Neve, and you might have, or maybe we shouldn't use names, but a person could think, if I'm religious, I should have an abhorrence for anything unholy. I should despise it. It should be despicable to me. But really, I must be a pretty bad Balchuva because I don't find those things, even things that are Averas. Honestly, if I wasn't from, I would love to do them. If I wasn't from, if I didn't have to keep kosher, this is not my personal opinion, but just let's say I could say I would love that cheeseburger, or I'd love to eat that non-kosher thing. Or I could say I would love to, I don't know, could fill in the gap of your own, your own particular taiva. You don't have to feel that you're supposed to hate it if you don't hate it. The thing is, and why won't you hate it? Because you're not a tzaddik. Tzaddik can hate all those things, but you, being a Benoni, you don't hate those things. In fact, if they were permitted to you, you would be very happy to have them. But, and what does it say in the Tanya? That certain things are part of your heart. To love, to desire something or to want to do something, even if it's an Avera. And you can't control your heart. We've learned about that already a few times, that what's in your heart, you can't control. I think we might have been joined by Shoshana. Shoshana, did you just join us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
Hi.
welcome, welcome. Good to see that you are on the thing. Okay, so
Thank you.
if you're a Benoni, you're not expected to hate and despise everything in the world that's not kosher and available to you, because that's not, you don't have reshut, you don't have domination over what your heart wants. Your heart is going to want what it wants because that's just how it is. A Benoni doesn't have jurisdiction over his heart. But what he does have jurisdiction, we've said a million times, is over his behavior and over his thought, speech, and action. So this is really important because a person could think, and this is why, and I said this in the last class, this is why the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. Person could become very frum, and just using the images of a man, let's say he's wearing his kapota and he's grown his payas, or he hasn't grown his payas, and he's going to mikveh every day and he's davening 3 times a day and he's doing all these things, but he has all these taivas in his head and he has all these taivas. He comes to the Rebbe, let's say he came to the Alter Rebbe, and he says, Rebbe, I'm such a evil person. I have all these taivas and I don't know what to do about myself. So the Rebbe says, okay, you have your taivas, big deal. That's how you were made. But the question is, what are you going to do about it? You don't have to do anything. You don't act on those taivas. That's all you're expected to do. That's what you're supposed to do. Focus on your thought, your speech, and your action. And what comes into your heart is not under your jurisdiction. Now, of course, we spoke about the thoughts. You can get a thought and you will get a thought that comes on its own, but then it's up to you how you plug into that thought and feed that thought. And that's up to you. So, not all times are the same. There are times like during davening when the heart is open and receptive. And then at that time, you could have a very emotional feeling against evil and against sins and against things that are not kosher, not permitted to you. But at other times, the heart may be blocked and spiritually insensitive, and you're not hating evil. The tzaddik v'tovlo, he has the capacity to be utterly disgusted by evil, but generally, normal people, we don't have that. But the Benoni's only achrayas, his only obligation is to turn sur meira va'aseh tov. Now that's so funny because we had that in our Hayom Yom. His only obligation is to turn from bad, sur meira v'aseh tov, and to do good. Like I said, b'dibur, b'ma'aseh, dibur u'machshava, in thought, speech, and action. Okay. And in these matters, not what comes into his heart, in these matters, harishut natuna lakol adam, every person has the capacity to choose how he's going to act. Now, if you've heard me saying this 100 times before, it's because this is what the whole Tanya is built on. You don't judge yourself by your base natural inclination. You judge by your actions and what you're choosing to do. לעשות, לדבר, לחשוב, גם משהו נגד תאווה ליבו והפכה ממש. You're able to speak and think even that which is contrary to the desire of your heart and diametrically opposed to it. You are able to do exactly opposite to what you want in your heart. All these movies, all this modern culture, all this nonsense. You watch a movie, a modern movie, and I realize that I compromise myself when I bring examples of movies, because of course people aren't supposed to be watching this junk to
But I
begin.
relate to it.
But you see all these things, like a lovely, beautiful, newly married woman who's very attractive. She gets a new job and she goes to work, and she has a very charismatic boss, and the boss starts asking her to work late and to stay overtime. And then she couldn't help it. Something happened between her and her boss. And what a surprise. And she just felt it in her heart that it was meant to be. It's all nonsense. You don't follow your heart. If you don't stay for late, you don't stay after hours, you don't go into yichud, and you don't cultivate relationship with your boss. If you're newly married woman, you just doesn't matter what you're feeling. Maybe you have a thought he's an attractive person. Maybe you have a thought, but that's what we say, that the heart, the mind rules over the heart. It's not like these things. I couldn't help it. I just fell in love. I couldn't help it. I just felt this. Like, forget about it. You can help it. You do help it. That's the whole point of where the voter is. For even when one's heart craves and desires a material pleasure, whether it's permitted, right? In which case, there's something that is, in which case it's only the lustful nature of the desire that is evil, whether it's permitted or even whether it's forbidden. In other words, you could be, what do they say, manuvel berishut hadin. You could be taivadik around something permitted. It's also not really such a great thing to do. But whether you're desiring something permitted or even worse, chas v'shalom, forbidden, you have the capacity. Yachol lehitgaber. You are able. Lehitgaber means to have gevura, to be like a soldier, to be strong. Lehitgaber. You can even hear it in the language. To overcome. Ulahasiach da'ato, and to divert your attention mimena lagamre, completely. Ba'amru lilibo. Now, how does what mind games, what tricks does he use so that his actions and his thoughts and his speech is not going to go according to his instinct, but it's going to follow the directions of his brain? What are the tricks? What are the tools of the trade of the Benoni? So the first thing is, he says to himself, Eineni rotze lihiot Rasha. I don't want to be a Rasha. I don't want to be a Rasha afilu sha'a echas. I don't want to be a Rasha even for a minute. So I have this inclination, but then I say to myself, oy vey, if I follow this down the path, I'm going to be a Rasha. I don't want to be a Rasha. Now, why doesn't he want to be a Rasha? Because even for a moment, afilu sha'a echat, even for a moment, because he says, Ki eineni rotze lihiyot muvdal v'nifrad chas v'shalom me Hashem. I don't want to be separated and parted from my connection to Hashem, chas v'shalom. Echad bishum ofen, kedichtiv avonoseichem mavdilim v'gome. Even for a minute, because if I do an Aveira, if I go down this path, if I'm going to follow my taiva and I'm going to follow my lower instinct, and by the way, it's not only taivas, it's to bear a grudge, speak lashon hara, that inclination. What did someone call it? It was so the taiva to kibbutz. I don't know what they said. It was very clever. I can't remember what they were saying, but my inner yenta. I don't want to give in to my inner yenta. I think that was the phrase that maybe I heard it from Miriam. I want to. It's so delicious for me to speak lashon hara, but I don't want to do an avera. Why? Because I don't want my relationship with Hashem to be severed or even damaged. Because every time I do an avera, I'm separating from Hashem. Now, it's important to know when we say this, I'm separated from Hashem, to also understand that you get separated from your own inner self. You get separated from your own soul. You get separated from the truth of who you are. And this goes back to the Hayom Yom that we started with in the beginning. If you're not authentically being yourself, which is a manifestation of godliness, which is really your soul identity, if you're not being true to that, then you're going to start malfunctioning in some way. Illness, distress, stress, disbalance. You don't want that. So you say to yourself, if I follow down this road of this inner yenta or my taiva or whatever, I'm not actually going to stay authentically myself. And in addition to that, I'm not going to be connected to my soul. And in addition to that, I'm going to be separated from Hashem. So that's one thing. You don't want to do that. Okay. Rak ani rotze ledavka bo. I want to unite with him. Nefesh ruach nafshi ruchi v'nishmati. I want my nefesh, my ruach, and my neshama to be connected with Hashem. Behit lavshan b'shlosha levushan yitbarach. I want all my garments to be connected with Hashem. I want to connect to Hashem with all of my garments, right? The garments of the soul, the thought, the speech, and the action. All of them. Ma'aseh, dibur, u'makshava, ba'Hashem, v'torato, u'mitzvato. I want all of myself to be congruent in my connection to my truth, my soul, my identity as a chelik Elokai. I want to be connected to Hashem in all ways. I don't want to be in pieces. I don't want to be fragmented. And this desire to unite with Hashem arises out of the love of Hashem that is surely hidden in my heart, although right now I'm not feeling it. Just as this love is found in the heart of all Jews who are called lovers of Hashem's name by reason of the inherent love of Hashem. So even if I'm not feeling this connection to Hashem right now, I know that it's really there in my heart. And actually, I can even think of a person, if this is part of the tools of the Benoni, I can even think of a person who's totally unconnected. I can think of a person who's totally unconnected. Now, a thought came in my mind, and I'm just thinking if it's in good taste to mention it, but maybe I will mention it. The thought can come into your mind that even the most secular person, when push comes to shove, will not betray his relationship to Hashem. So now, am I going to betray my relationship to Hashem? So the thought that came to my mind was all those beautiful Israelis who were at the festival in
Parade?
what?
The parade?
No, no, no. The October 7th, the festival.
Oh, yes, yes.
Um, what was the field called?
Nova.
Nova, at the Nova Festival. A lot of those Yidden were very, very far away from Torah and mitzvahs. Proof being that it was a festival on Yontif, and at the festival there was a huge actual construction of a big idol. I don't know if you saw it, but at the Nova they had a huge, like, idol, like in the front of the thing. It was mamish, like, whatever, crazy. And those people, push comes to shove, were not eating if they couldn't eat kosher food, fasting when they figured out it was Yom Kippur, doing whatever they could to find a siddur, davening to Hashem all the time, would never have converted. So the Tanya actually says that one of the tools of the Benoni, when he's trying to stop himself from following after his instincts, he could think even a person who's totally not from would sacrifice his life for the sake of his relationship with Hashem. So am I less than him? Am I even worse than that person? So this is kind of part of what the Benoni could say to himself to give him tools not to succumb to his taiva or his instinct. And then it says that the reason that a person sins is because for a minute he goes a little bit insane. He gets a little crazy. Ella shenichnas bo ruach shtus, comes into him a ruach shtus. That means a spirit of folly, a ruach shtus. V'nidme lo sheba'avera zu odenu beyahaduto ve'en nishmato muvdelet me'elohei Yisrael. Sometimes this ruach shtus comes and it says to you, you can do this sin and it's not going to actually interfere with your soul, and it's not going to interfere with your Jewishness, and it's not going to sever you from the God of Israel. But the Ruach Shtus says, tries to convince him that nothing bad is going to happen. And also the person forgets that he has this love of Hashem forgiven in his heart. But you don't want to be such a fool, and you don't want to be submitting to this Ruach Shtus. You want to be a person who's awake and who's serving Hashem, being conscious of what you're doing. Okay, so any comments? Any comments?
I'm loving this class. I'm actually enjoying it more. I think everything else was leading up to it, and it was a little tedious. The definitions, but I'm truly enjoying this.
Right. Well, thank you, and it's practical, right? It's not, as you say, definitions. It's giving us specific tools, and okay, right. So, okay, so now, then it says, and also, if one was able to actually hate evil in one's heart, like a tzaddik does, that would be very nice. But it's a level that's very hard to come to, this level of despising things that are not kosher or not, for a Jewish neshama. You have to be on the level that's called ahava b'tanugim. It's a certain level of loving, delighting in holiness and delighting in godliness. That's a level of a tzaddik. We're not really there.
Isn't there a book called that? Isn't one of your people's books have that name
Ahava b'tanugim.
or something Tanugam. I think my sister got me
Tanugim.
it's a intense book. Couldn't handle it.
I don't know it, but this idea of delight, I just want to speak about it for a minute. This idea of delight
Yes,
is the level of the tzaddik, because that's when service of Hashem becomes so sweet that it's like delicious, right? Like ta'anug is pleasure. So when you get to a very evolved level, and we already said, right? We said it today in this class, that all these different types of yidden, the tzaddik, the Benoni, the this kind of tzaddik, that kind of tzaddik, they're different aspects of us. We can reach these levels ourselves, all of them in moments. So there's a moment when you could be, although your general functioning is not like a tzaddik, but there could be a moment when you have such pleasure in serving Hashem, you're delighting in the goodness and the juiciness and the tastefulness and the pleasure of serving Hashem. So that's called ahava b'tanugim. You're serving Hashem with a great juiciness, like a pleasure. So that's really the bliss of the world to come. When it says that, our sages say that that's when the souls will bask in the radiance of the divine presence, and they'll have this love which experiences delights. That kind of love which can just revel in the delights of serving Hashem, that kind of pleasure begets the kind of hatred of evil that a tzaddik can have. It seems funny that a tzaddik should have an experience of hatred, but his awareness of the pleasure of service and of being in the kedusha is so developed that he can have the capacity to really hate the evil, because he understands that that evil is blocking that good, right? You can't hate the evil unless you understand what its consequences are, and because he has such an appreciation of the good and the holiness and the light and the kedusha, so he can therefore have a more expressed and articulated dislike for something that's going to hamper that, an experience of that, right? So it says, Va'al zeh amru Rav Husseinu Zichronon Levracha, about this kind of person, olamcha tire b'chayecha v'chulei, you shall see a glimmer of your reward in the world to come in your lifetime. Va'ein kol adam zoche lezeh, not every man is privileged to get to this state. Ki zehu ka'ein kiblu schar. Not every man is privileged to attain the state, for it is in the nature of a reward received from above, and a reward can only be received, not taken. Okay. Anyway, so this is kind of like the level of a gift. Okay. And then it says, talking about tzaddikim, and there's different grades of tzaddikim. There's pious men, chasidim, strong men, giburim, who gain mastery over the evil inclination, scholars of the Torah, prophets, tzaddikim, and so forth. Now, the Tanya goes to another thing, and it says that when we were born, when our soul first came, actually before our soul, or maybe right before, right after, I'm not quite sure exactly when, but it says here, right before birth, we were given, we were supposed to take on a shavua, an oath. And what was the oath? Tehi tzaddik va'al tehi rasha. You should be a tzaddik and you shouldn't be a rasha. So the Tanya quoted this before, that there's an oath that we all get before birth, and the oath is tehi tzaddik velo tehi rasha. You should be a tzaddik and you shouldn't be a rasha. But now we just said that's not so easy. We just said not everybody's privileged to become a tzaddik. And we just said that not everyone can have this level of delighting in Hashem and hating evil like this, in this way. These are the qualities of a tzaddik. So what does it mean? You should be a tzaddik and not a rasha. So it says that, okay, so about not being a rasha, that part we can understand, because if you sin, then you're rasha. And the whole point of the Tanya is to teach us that we can control ourselves and not sin. Okay. We can control the lust in the heart. We can try and sur merava say tov. We just said we can study Torah. We can think of the person who has no merits at all, but when push comes to shove, he's not going to sin. We got that. So we kind of got it down a little bit, how we cannot be a rasha.
Can you go through that list again, besides learning Torah?
We can think about the secular person who, when push comes to shove, is not going to sever his relationship with Hashem. We Surmerava say tov. We think about how we don't want to sever our relationship with Hashem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of got it down that we can not be a rasha. We want to keep that obligation, right? Honor the shavua, the oath. But how can we be a tzaddik? We just said tzaddik is this big level, and only some people are worthy to be a tzaddik. And how can we honor this oath? So it's interesting that the Tanya now says, after telling us that a tzaddik is a whole other level and everything, it now says that, but still, every day, try to reach the level of a tzaddik just for a little bit, where not that you reveling in the juiciness of serving Hashem and you appreciating the beautifulness of it, the opposite, where you actually focus just for a few minutes, a few moments on. It's hard for me to get these words out of my mouth because it's so much not my nature. And it's so funny because it's interesting that I have a resistance, but I'll just read the words that are in front of me. One must also set aside specific periods to seek for himself means of abhorring evil, of loathing worldly pleasures. So, in other words, we said already.
Why are they connected? Those are two separate things. No?
It's so interesting that they connected. And it's actually interesting because my retreat is based on this idea that Nachash and Mashiach have the same gematria. Nachash and Mashiach, they have the same gematria. That every light has its own darkness and every darkness has its light. So if you want to be a tzaddik and you have the capacity to revel in godliness and a closeness with godliness, you have to appreciate that what opposes that is utterly disgusting and horrible and needs to be abhorred. And for some reason, this is one of the identifying qualities of the tzaddik, v'tovlo, because the tzaddik v'ralo, he doesn't do bad either, but he doesn't hate evil the way that tzaddik v'tovlo hates evil. But the tzaddik v'tovlo hates evil so much, but he also has the capacity to transform that evil somehow, to do something with it, to break it apart. He hates it so much that he has the capacity to transmute it in some way. I don't know if you're following me. So
all I know is that we're getting examples in everyday real time when we're experiencing so much evil, so intensely. So
right. I think we can just think of our mayor, and then we would be
exactly what I had in mind.
So it's so interesting because it says af al picha, and even though we're not really on the level of tzaddik generally, tzarich לקבוע לו עתים גם כן להסיט עצות בנפשו להיות מואס ברע. That we concentrating on evil and how we abhor it. And then the Tanya brings an example. For example, this is another and then there's
Be
another
your authentic self.
and then right and then there's another tool for the Benoni, that if you being drawn into a taiva or into something, you should imagine, and this is kind of like a little mental trick that the Tanya is actually telling you to do. You should imagine that thing in a disgusting way. So the example is, let's say you desire something not kosher. Imagine it once it's been digested and it's gone through all its processes and it becomes something kind of that has to be excreted. I'm sorry to use these words, but this is what the Tanya says. So when you think of something that you have a taiva for, imagine it in some kind of disgusting fashion, and that's going to shift your consciousness from desiring it. In other words, if there's
I
a
can give you a real
person,
life example of that.
if you're desiring to have a relationship with a person who's not kosher for you, right? Somebody, I mean, I'll just think if somebody chas v'shalom desires, I'll use the example of a man desiring a woman because that makes it further away from us. But let's say a man desires a woman, then he should imagine her, imagine, I don't know. I don't want to use the example that's here, but like ultimately that food that you're desiring will turn into rot and worms and become garbage, right? You go to the bathroom and somehow the Tanya is saying, if you think about that, it's going to turn you away from desiring that thing. Or you desire some person, so think one day they'll be rotting in the grave. I don't know. My examples are not great, but I don't like the examples of the Tanya either. But anyway, what it's saying is that you can use your mind to shift and to think about something undesirable about that person. It's like if you're public speaking and they say, imagine everybody in the audience is naked, then you won't be nervous.
In their underwear.
Or something like that. So if you're desiring something and you're drawn after it, so in your mind, make it disgusting in some way, and then you won't be drawn after it. And on the other side, you should train yourself to delight and rejoice in Hashem by reflecting to the best of your ability the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof. And he may well know that he will not attain this degree of loathing evil and delighting in goodness, godliness with the fullest measure of truth, but he can imagine it. And in that way, even if he's hating evil or he's focusing on it in just for a little bit, then even for a little bit, he can be like a tzaddik. And then he can fulfill the oath, because for a few moments he can be like a tzaddik, feeling disgust for negativity and for evil. And so that's kind of another tool of how he can manage to keep himself in this place where he's directing his behavior from his consciousness and not being driven by his behavior, by his natural instincts. And then it says, and it ends, the chapter ends, kedichtiv, like it says, Simchu tzadikim ba, rejoice, O tzadikim, in Hashem, v'titkayem bo be'emet hashvua shemashbi'im tihiyet tzaddik. And in this way, you'll fulfill the oath of being a tzaddik. So we had a few tools that you can utilize to enable yourself to serve Hashem not by thinking that you have to be a person who doesn't have inclinations. That's what makes you human. This is classroom earth. You came here to struggle over yourself. Everyone sort of knows this, that the purpose of being in this world is to refine yourself. The way you refine yourself is to struggle. The way you struggle is that you struggle against your inclinations. So bringing your inclination as a reason why you have to behave in a certain way is absolutely not okay, according to the Tanya. Of course, you're going to have those inclinations. Everybody was created to have different inclinations, but as an Eved of Hashem, you use your conscious mind to overcome your inclinations and assert yourself to think righteous thoughts, speak righteous words, and do righteous action. And to
Amen.
help you, and to help you, you have the thought that you don't want to be separated from Hashem. You don't want your relationship from Hashem to be separated, and you don't believe the Ruach Shtus that comes and tells you that if you just do this or you just do that, it's not going to affect you and it's not going to affect your relationship, because it will. And that's why it says a person only sins if they believe, if they follow the Ruach Shtus, which is this sort of moment of insanity that comes and tells you that there won't be any consequence of your actions. So for a minute you believe him, but that's a Ruach Shtus. So try not to be seduced by the Ruach Shtus. Think of the fact that even simple people who not even connected at all, when push comes to shove, they wouldn't want to surrender their relationship with Hashem. And so you don't want to do that either. Something along those lines.
Very good.
Yeah, so that's
Excellent class. Really good class.
yeah, so that's chapter 14 of Tanya. And
Did we finish chapter 14? We did the whole
yeah,
chapter?
yeah,
Wow.
we did the
You
whole
don't look jet lagged at all. You look really like very present.
very present. Well, I becoming more present as the days go by. I was a little bit like, whoa.
As we get older, jet lag is harder.
I was so disorientated. I was disorientated getting to Israel. I was very disorientated, and I was really disorientated coming back. Never have I experienced such, like, I was like, blah.
More and more as we get older.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I
It's
don't
human.
like it. Anyway, okay. We
One of these
can't.
days I want to see pictures of this house.
Well,
Unfinished.
the pictures of the house right now are intense, because it's really like it's a contract. It's very pulled apart right now.
Yeah.
It's like really undone.
Mm.
It has to get undone to get done. So we have to have a lot of siyata dishmaya and imuna that it's all going to, come together before we 120. Like, yeah,
That's wonderful.
yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to
See you Wednesday,
Shoshana.
Mrs. Sham.
Yes, and thank you
Okay.
to Tina Bracha for participating.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And Shoshana, I don't see her.
Shoshana, do you have any comments? Do you want to, any comments,
No,
class?
no. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
All right.
Nighty night. Hi,
Okay.
Shoshana.
All the best.
Night, everybody. Thanks.
Okay, good night.